Well, good morning, everyone. Thomas Montgomery. It's a beautiful Thursday morning, February 23rd, 2023. We get together with our distribution partners most weekday mornings at this time to talk about strategies, tips, techniques, share success stories, and often just problem solve. We're listening to the comments, concerns, questions that each of you have. And I thought today probably the time would be best well spent by digging into the whole debt buying industry, stepping back and looking at more of a macro environmental perspective of what is this whole debt buying thing about? Now, why is that relevant to you and I? It's relevant to you and I because what you and I do as technical advisors is we help entrepreneurs become credible enough to get funding. And that falls typically under the 3 C's: credit, capacity, and collateral. Well, what you and I do is take people from wherever they are and help them improve their 3 C's so they qualify for a minimum of $100,000 of funding guaranteed. The debt buying topic fits under a couple of those 3 C's. With our new credit and funding program, we include a debt portfolio at no cost. It's built in. So each credit and funding program participant has a debt portfolio that they could seek to liquidate or not. They don't have to. If they don't liquidate it, they still get the benefit of having that additional asset on their financials for collateral. So it serves that purpose. But if they do want to liquidate it, then this type of topic is helpful for them. But again, there's no requirement that a client has to liquidate the receivables, just to clarify. All right, so let's dig into this. What's shown on the screen here. Today's topic is the conversation about the debt buying business model. We're going to look at it more from a macro environmental level. So, of course, for disclosure, our organization, Business Paralegal Corporation, we do sell debt portfolios to entrepreneurs. And as I mentioned, they're included for free now in the credit and funding program. We do that to help them have additional collateral on their financial statements. And they may, so again, they're not required to monetize the portfolios by collecting. And in general, if you're a business owner and someone owes you money, it kind of makes sense to try to collect the money that they owe you, right? And so when we're transferring assets to clients, they could and probably should, but they don't have to, seek to collect that money. So hopefully you can see how in the broader context this fits together. So let's start by looking at the debt buying field from an introductory perspective. I know this is a busy slide. This was developed for a different purpose, but I wanted to share it with you today. So debt buying is a $100+ billion business. So we need to start with understanding that debt buying is much bigger than just these little conversations that you and I have. It is a major industry. Annual transactions of over $100 billion. So it's a big deal. Now, in terms of who's doing this, we've been able to track down about 500 privately owned debt buyers. And then to the best of our knowledge, there are 4 publicly traded debt buyers who actively purchase and collect portfolios of debt as listed here. So let's stick with this first paragraph for a moment. So what is this showing? Well, again, debt buying is real. It's a big deal. There's not a lot, but a number of players. And some of those players are publicly traded companies. So what do we know about that? If you're running a publicly traded company, you're under all kinds of scrutiny. So everything that you do better be legal or it'll be found out. So what I'm trying to reiterate is that debt buying it's real, it's legitimate, and it's a big deal. It's commonly not available to the average person. And that's what you and I are doing, is breaking it down into smaller portfolios so the average person, the average entrepreneur can leverage it. Okay, everybody good with that first paragraph? So what debt buyers do is they purchase defaulted debt. So this is not like AR financing or invoice factoring. We're talking about debt instruments that are not being paid as agreed. So are there different types of debts? Like, could you acquire a portfolio of performing mortgages? Absolutely. There's a huge market for that. But that's not what debt buying is. Debt buying is non-performing debt, defaulted debt. See the difference? So does that mean, oh, it's worthless? Absolutely not. And we'll go through that. It is very valuable, but it's not valuable in the sense that, oh, if I acquire a portfolio of defaulted debt, these people are already on a payment plan and I'll just pick up that revenue stream. That's not true. So typically the defaulted debt could be credit card debt, car loans, student loans, even cell phone bills, medical bills, professional service obligations, health club bills, all those are examples. And typically they're bought for pennies on the dollar. Well, why are they so cheap? Well, because they're defaulted debt. So they're real, they're collectible, they have value, but they're not as valuable as an open bill that someone is paying as agreed. Hopefully that makes sense. Some people that are financially illiterate think, oh, if it's a defaulted debt, it has no value. But that's a foolish, uneducated perspective. It does have value. So debt buyers purchase these in debt portfolios, either from original creditors or other debt buyers and debt brokers. Debt buyers then attempt to collect the debts using a variety of methods. Could be just simply calling the people all the way to lawsuits. If a debt buyer is unsuccessful in its collection efforts, it often resells the debt portfolio to another debt buyer who can then work it or resell it. So maybe this is foreign to you, and some of you I know have a background in this, like Alfred, but this is helping you understand what debt buying is all about. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to post it into the Q&A of Zoom. All right, so when debt buyers purchase debts, they become the legal owners of those debts. And so if you've done any transactions with us, either you directly or with your clients, you see, I mean, all of this is documented. This documentation is developed by attorneys, and it's real, it's legitimate. It's transferring ownership from one party to the next, because otherwise it'd be fraudulent. And the last thing you or I want to do is be involved with anything that's fraudulent. Now, the truth, though, is often there's very little information that is exchanged at the time of purchase. Debt buyers usually only receive an electronic file that includes just some basic information about the debt and the debtor. Often it does not include the media, the supporting documents. Now, if you ever look at any of our debt buying agreements, we agree that we have the media, which is the source documents, and we make those available to our debt buyers. But what I'm explaining to you here, in the general marketplace, in the global marketplace, unrelated to us, a lot of times there is no supporting media, and it's still real and it's still collectible. But ours is precious because we have solid media. See the difference? Okay. Any questions so far as we've gone through an introduction of the debt buying industry? Everybody good so far? All right. So lawsuits are typically filed by debt buyers, and that's a relatively new and fast-growing segment of the debt collection industry. It used to be you just report them to the credit bureaus, use a collection agency or other third party, but that is waning, and increasingly what's happening is litigation. So the people that are sued, now who's being sued? It's whoever owes the money. And it doesn't matter if they're rich or they're poor, if they're black or white, if they live in the city or live in the country. If they owe the debt, they're going to be sued. Now, a lot of times people that are sued for defaults are lower income, elderly, or disabled. But I mean, it just depends on the source documents who defaulted on the given instrument. Now, a lot of times these folks cannot effectively defend themselves. Often they have no legal representation. They're often intimidated by the court process. They often lack knowledge of their legal defense. They maybe even face language barriers. Sometimes they don't even receive notice of the lawsuits. So because of that, debt buyers routinely win. And we'll talk about some statistics in a moment. When I say that debt buyers normally win, it's a very, very, very high probability. And we'll look at some statistics from a case study in a moment. So is this taking advantage of someone? Absolutely not. I mean, these are people that had an agreement. They had a mortgage they didn't pay, a car loan they didn't pay, a credit card they didn't pay, a cell phone bill they didn't pay, a professional service agreement they didn't comply with. So this isn't making up bad things. These are people that didn't do what they promised to do, and it's a way of monetizing those defaults. Everybody make sense? Does that make sense to everyone? So what happens in many cases is we'll get a default judgment. So once we have a default judgment, debt buyers can seize people's assets. We can freeze their bank accounts. We can garnish their wages to collect the debts and so forth. These judgments can also be put on their credit reports that will prevent them from being able to secure housing, obtain credit, in some cases even find employment. And judgments are enforceable for 20 years or longer in some cases. So you can see why the litigation approach is the most effective way in collecting money from people who have not paid, because it has such teeth to it. It has so much enforceability. Now, the other is, and I think this is what Alfred's hinting towards, you could just stop. If you're a debt buyer, you could just stop with the judgment and sell the judgments, because judgments are worth more than just defaulted debts, because now they've gone through the court system and they've been essentially deemed bona fide. So with that, any questions on the introductory piece of the debt buying industry? Any questions, comments, concerns? Okay, so let's roll forward then. Page 2. So with a study, and we did not conduct the study, so I'm not taking credit for that, but there's a 2-year study conducted on debt buying and litigation. There were 26 debt buyers that was examined, and those 26 debt buyers, just 26, filed almost 500,000 lawsuits, 457,322 to be exact. And all these were in New York City Civil Court over a 2-year period. They were awarded about $1.1 billion. And this is just in one city. Now, granted, New York City is a large city, but the study was done specifically in New York City. Think about that for a moment. So a small number of debt buyers, tremendous number of lawsuits, incredible results, incredible results. Now, with that being said, according to this case study, debt buyers prevailed 94.3% of the time. If there was anything that you could gamble on and you knew you would win 94.3% of the time, you'd probably do it, right? What do you think your chances of winning the lottery are? People will buy those crazy lottery tickets and they have what, like a 1 in 13 million chance. Here, we can buy a portfolio and we have a 94% chance of winning against every debtor. 94% based on this case study. Usually getting a default judgment, which are automatic judgments in favor of the debt buyer because the other person didn't show up. In most cases, the other person will not show up. Now, how often? Let's get to statistics. In almost every case, specifically 95% of the time with default judgments, they are low or moderate income. That's not the statistic I was looking for, so sorry. So here we're saying 94% won, and I guess I don't have the stat on here. I apologize, that I was referring to that talked about how often, because very few of these go to court. Very few of these go to court, because once someone gets served, the debtor, many of them will do nothing. The smart ones will hire an attorney. And I know in our world, we love when a debtor hires an attorney. We love working with attorneys on breach of contract, because usually the attorney will talk some sense into the debtor and say, man, you need to pay or make some sort of payment arrangement. Not a single person sued in this sample was represented by an attorney. And only 1% of the people sued ever were represented by counsel. And I guess this is the statistic I was looking for earlier. Only 1 out of 10 even respond to the summons and complaint, which results in a default judgment. So what do you take away from this study, a 2-year study with almost 500,000 transactions? So it's significant sample size, right? Well, what we can take away from it is if you're a debt buyer, you're in a pretty damn good position, because it's very, very, very probable that you will be able to win and thus collect the money that's owed to you. Big deal, right? So again, let's step back. Why does this matter? Well, when within the process of becoming credible for funding, there's the 3 C's: credit, capacity, and collateral. We can provide clients a portfolio of receivables, like we're talking about here, a debt portfolio that's real, right? I'm showing you that these are real things, real instruments, really collectible. So that improves the financials of the client. So now they have accounts receivable. So now they have collateral. And if they're short on money, then we can actually help them collect the money that's owed and turn that into cash, because frankly, most clients would rather have cash than receivables. But again, disclaimer, they don't have to collect the money that's owed to them, right? You could offer a lawn service and cut people's yards and never ask them to pay you. You'll probably go out of business, but there's nothing that requires you as an owner of debt, or nothing that you as owner of a business where people owe you money that you have to collect. Maybe you just want to write it all off. That would be your choice. Not very profitable, that would be your choice. All right, so let's dig into debt buyer lawsuits one layer deeper, and then we'll open it up for questions. So over the past decade, evidence from both debt buyers and court records show that debt buyers have turned increasingly to filing lawsuits to collect debts. And again, that is our model. We found that to be the most effective. In recent years, civil courts across the country have been overwhelmed in some cases by surges in debt collection filings. I know when I'm going over to the courthouse, if I'm filing just 1 or 2 suits at a time, it's not so much overwhelming. But when you go over there with 100 or 200 or 500 suits to file, that is a big amount of lawsuits. And with that, that can have an impact of overwhelming the courts. The Federal Trade Commission recently observed that the majority of cases on many small court dockets on a given day are debt collection matters. I know when I'm over at the courthouse working with the court clerk, there's usually me and usually a representative from like Rent-A-Center or Aaron's Rent-To-Own, where people have gotten a refrigerator or a mattress or something and did not pay as agreed. It seems like us and then that industry in our local courthouse is what composes most of the court's time. The glut of debt collection cases has posed considerable challenges to the smooth and efficient operations in courts. Again, we never want to take someone to court. Never, never, never. We just want them to pay their bills. If they don't pay their bills, then we litigate. But the goal is not to go to court. The goal is just to get them to pay what they promised to pay. So again, using New York City as an example, because of the case study, debt collectors filed approximately 300,000 lawsuits per year. The vast, not just most, the vast majority of them resulted in default judgments, which are automatic wins because the person sued never appeared in court. Now, I know for the instruments that we put into our portfolios, most of them require in-person litigation in a rural setting. And that's an advantage, right, to the debt buyer, because the debtor, the person that owes, will have to travel hundreds, maybe thousands of miles to an area where there is no mass transit to even be able to defend themselves. So that's a strategic advantage of our portfolios. Debt collection lawsuits, especially those resulting in default judgments have a significant impact on low and moderate income people. Debt buyers use default judgments to freeze bank accounts, garnish wages, pressure them into unaffordable settlements. Judgments also appear on credit reports, preventing people from being able to secure housing. I think we talked about this earlier, but what the survey found is that the impact of the people that don't pay, that default, that lose the lawsuits, it's appalling to them. It's crushing to them. So what we want to do is, when we're managing a collection account, we don't want to go to litigation. We don't want it to be difficult or painful for the debtor. We just want them to pay, right? We just want them to pay what they promised to pay, or work out some sort of alternative payment arrangement. We want to keep it out of the courts. We don't want to file lawsuits. We just want people to pay. But people will be goofy, right? You'll send them a demand letter and say, hey, if you don't pay, we're going to go to court. And they'll come up with all kinds of just bullshit responses. So they go to court. So our information is here. I want to see what questions, comments, concerns any of you have. Again, our goal today was to step back and look at debt buying from a broader perspective, because I think it's a new conversation for many of you. So when we talk about putting debt portfolios together and putting them on clients' financials to build their collateral, allowing them to liquidate that, to add to their capacity, their cash flow, I think sometimes there's a lack of a frame of reference, not familiarity with it. So that's why we thought today we would take a few minutes and look at the bigger picture. Who has questions for this, regarding this? Yeah, so Jeanette's asking about helping collect in your portfolio. Sure, yeah. So if you have a portfolio, I would recommend emailing us and we'll work out a game plan to liquidate that portfolio. Absolutely. But I think without a question, without doubt, I can make it a little smaller, that again, debt buying is a huge business. It's not something that's fuzzy, that's pretend, that's fake. It's not something that's going to get you in trouble. Again, there are 4 publicly traded companies that do this, and I listed them on here, and maybe there's more now, but from our research, those are the big 4. So there's just nothing about this that's illegal, unethical, immoral. It's just simply holding people accountable for the debts that they owe that they haven't paid. And it could be a primary account, money that's owed directly to you, or it could be an acquired account that was originally owed to someone else, and now it's owed to you. Thus, it would be you'd be a debt buyer. Anyone have questions, comments, concerns? All right, Timothy's asking about the timeline, and that's a typical question we get. So in general, what happens is we'll send a demand letter out because we do not want to sue people. We do not want to consume the court's time or resources. So we send a demand letter. Hey, you owe this money, pay it, or you're going to be sued. Some people will pay it or make payment arrangements. That's awesome. That's the way it's supposed to work. They're doing what they promised to do in just a bit of a hybrid fashion. But in other cases, they don't. So then we sue. So then they get served. Sometimes that's enough to jolt them into saying, oh shit, I don't want to be involved with a lawsuit. Now I'll pay or make payment arrangements. So that could be the trigger. So that's awesome. What if that doesn't work? Well, if that doesn't work, then we go through the court process, and discovery is next. Discovery is the legal process of collecting information from the debtor, and that's usually pretty uncomfortable. That could be the trigger where they say, Timothy, I'm answering Timothy's question, that could be where they say, okay, great, I don't want to be part of this anymore, I want it to go away, I'll pay or make payment arrangements, or ultimately we go to court. Most people don't want to go to court. Most people don't show up at court. The subgroup of debtors will hire counsel, hire an attorney. Again, we love that. We love when they hire an attorney. When people threaten, I'm going to contact my attorney, it's like, please do, let's schedule a 3-way call, because attorneys are going to talk some sense into them, although attorneys are typically paid per hour, and the more time it takes, the more they're paid. But I mean, we have all the media for our debt portfolio. So if it's a defaulted debt, chances are they're going to lose. Are there any other questions, comments, concerns that any of you have regarding the debt buying business model? So my goal today isn't to convince you to do something, but I need you to understand that this is legitimate, it's credible, it's a big deal, and this is a valuable asset that you and I can help put on clients' financials so they have the collateral, and if they wish, we can help them liquidate it to turn those receivables into cash to put money into their account. And a lot of these small businesses need more money into their account. And this is money that doesn't have to be paid back. It's not debt. It's not a loan. All right. Well, we covered a lot. Thank you so much. We'll see you back tomorrow morning. Have a great day. Bye-bye.